And so I'll call the meeting to order, welcome everyone here, and take roll. It looks like Trustee Duggar's here, and Trustee Kendall's is out of town. I know Trustee Kendall won't be here, but everyone else is here, Lenora. So now we'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we can stand and say the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is arriving just. Trustee Kendall are here. So number 3 is to review and approve the agenda. I would like to make one to my agenda under 8B, which is Finance, Operations, and Maintenance 5, the little letter V5. It's listed as an action item to approve the beach transportation contract extension, but there is some minor language that still needs to be discussed by the administration and the beach side. And so because that language wasn't included in what went out with the packet, in order to give better notice to the public, we'll have that come back as soon as the language is cleared up, and then the actual contract language won't have to be changed at another set. So is that okay with everyone to deal with that as an information item for tonight? See nods around the table. Any other requests to change any items or move any items on the agenda? Seeing none, then we go on to item number 4, which is to approve the minutes. The first are the minutes from the regular board meeting of June 25th, 2019 that begin on page 5. Are there any changes that anyone would like to make to the minutes? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 25th? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Decker. All those in favor of approving the June 25th regular meeting minutes, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to the July 9th, 2019 minutes from the regular meeting, which begin on page 14. Are there any modifications that anyone requests to those minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting on July 9th? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Newbold. All those in favor of approving the minutes from July 9th, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Now we come to item number 5, which is public comment on non-agenda items. This is a time that we set both at the beginning and the end of every meeting for public comment on non-agenda items. If it's an agenda item, we ask you to hold your comments until we're actually discussing that agenda item. Other than that, this is the time to have the public tell us what things that they have concerns about, what things they'd like us to know about that is going on in the district. And since it's non-agenda items, it would just be comment to us. If it's necessary to make it an action item or get more information, then it would become a regular agenda item. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? That was a long speech for no public comment, but thank you for being here.
Nicely done.
Pardon?
Nicely done.
Thanks. And there was no written correspondence received. So we move on to 6A, which are announcements from Superintendent Watson.
Thank you, Chair Holland. Just a couple of things that I wanted the board to be aware of. First of all, welcome Isaac, one of our student trustees from Sentinel, so thanks for being here. Really appreciate that. One of the things also, I just wanted to thank the board. I know we have a couple of meetings, so this meeting and then next Tuesday, another meeting to approve the... It's Thursday?
It's Tuesday. Oh, you're right. It's Tuesday. Yes.
I have my days wrong. Next Tuesday to approve the budget, but also to have a work session. So Marcia and I had a chance to meet with Bia today to talk a little bit about the work session, and I think it'll be very valuable time next week, so really appreciate your time. A couple of announcements from me. I've done a lot of site visits. I think I've been in every single building and wore my construction hat when I needed to, and had a chance last Friday to actually go up to Sealy Swan High School and had a chance to meet with the principal and the school counselor. It was just a really, really nice visit. And then Last week also went to Dickinson Lifelong Learning Center, learned all about their program, very impressed with what we offer in terms of that program. And then today, I think, let's check this one off my list, I got to go to the bus barn and look at the buses and the retrofits with the seat belts. Pretty exciting stuff, and just really impressed with that. In addition, lots of one-on-one meetings. I think in the last board meeting, I talked about my entry plan and the one-on-one meetings. Lots of one-on-one meetings with staff, both at the administration level and also some teachers. But I have just begun some of the one-on-one meetings with community members. So that's just kind of the next step of my process. And it's been very informative and enlightening. I've done a lot of listening and taking notes. Also appreciate the time of the board members. I think I've met one-on-one with each board member, so really appreciate your time as well. And again, as I said, with my entry plan, I'll come back at a later time this fall and kind of give you some general themes that I gathered from my one-on-one meetings. I wanted to just make an announcement. From what I heard from Burley this last weekend, we used Mount Jumbo to host some wildland firefighters to get them out of the rain, so that was kind of exciting to hear that news, but really excited we could help out. It was a very rainy weekend, as we all know. And then the last thing, start of the year announcements. So tomorrow is our first official kickoff for start of the year. Is our principals meeting tomorrow morning. We'll have a chance to meet with our principals and our supervisors. Excited about that. On August 23rd, if you are available to attend, would love you to attend the all-staff assembly, our opening assembly on August 23rd at, it'll start at 7:45 in the Sentinel High School Gymnasium. Really very brief opening remarks, and then just a chance for staff to reconnect with each other and over some light refreshments that morning. So hopefully you can stop by. And then obviously start of school shortly after that, August 28th. So we've got lots of stuff ramping up. That's all I have.
Thanks. Any announcements from trustees? And I think Rob mentioned this, but we are canceling the second regular board meeting in August because we are meeting Tuesday, not Thursday, my error, next week instead. So, any other announcements? Seeing none, then we'll return back to the agenda, which is 7A1, which is to approve the second reading of Board Policy 7321P, which is titled Purchasing, Bids, and Contracts, as is explained in the background information. It has been presented to us on a first reading. It was sent out for public comment. There was no public comment, so it is coming back for second reading and adoption if there is a motion to that effect. And so, Pat, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that?
No, nothing else.
Okay. Any questions about it? For Pat?
Question.
Sure.
Would it be all right if I got a copy of the
Yeah.
notes
Oh,
throughout?
sure.
Settings things on it, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Seeing no questions, then the recommendation is that the trustees adopt the revised board policy 7321P titled Purchasing, Bids, and Contracts. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Lorenzen and seconded by trustee Newbold. Any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of adopting the revised board policy 7321P, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we come to approve the second reading of Board Policy 2515, Contracts with Third Parties Affecting Student Records. As I previously discussed, we had seen this on first reading, and Ray explained in detail what prompted the recommendation that this board policy be created and adopted. So, Ray's not here, but I'm sure we could try to answer any questions that anyone would have. As is indicated in the background information, no public comment was received on this either. Seeing no questions, then the recommendation is that the trustees adopt Board Policy 2515, titled Contracts with Third Parties Affecting Student Records. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Wake and seconded by trustee Decker. Is there any board discussion? I just want to say, even though Ray's not here, thanks again to her for all the work she did, both with the legislature and then in crafting language and working with legal counsel to get this up and running. So thank you very much to Ray. Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of adopting Board Policy 2515, contracts with third parties affecting student records, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And then there is a request from Monique Fortman, who's the director of the Dickinson, it is really the Lifelong Learning Center, even though it says just the Life Learning Center, I guess. And so I don't know if you want to explain or if Pat wants to explain, because I know we both have discussed it. So Pat, if you just want to.
Yeah, thanks.
I chatted briefly with Monique about the grant, and it's described fairly well in the application summary that's attached. It's for adults, English as a secondary language, and it provides, the funds will help support and provide services for adults as they try and transition as non-English speaking citizens and residents. And so this was through the Department of, I want to say Public Health and Human Services, and they specifically asked Monique to apply, given their work in the past. So I told Monique I could pass along any questions and provide that background.
Any questions about the grant, other than it looks like it's going to a really good purpose? Trustee Decker?
Is this like one-time only funding coming through DPHHS, or is it something that we would have the opportunity to apply for in the future?
There may be potential to apply in the future, because that's sort of typical of DPHHS grants, but as I understand it, there's a one-time infusion.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the grant application summary that's attached to the agenda. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Decker. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Decker?
I hope that we look for every possible way to fund that work, because as everybody knows, in Missoula, it's a growing need and an important one, and a service that I'm proud MCPS can provide.
Any other board comment? Seeing none, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the grant application summary that's attached to our agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on. Only, it's an elementary item, and it's proposed lease of Cold Springs Elementary. So Pat, if you want to start out the conversation and provide background information.
Several months ago, Superintendent Thane had indicated to the board that there's some interest in folks leasing the Cold Springs site. We talked a little bit about what the costs of utilities are at that site, which are about $5,000 per month. That proposed tenant, or that interested party, pulled out. And so since that time, we've been approached, the district has, by Mark Roberts, who has a plan to rent a portion of the facility, about 28,000 square feet, to operate a preschool daycare center. This is information-only item because we're still working through the details of the prospective lease, which we would present to the board. But in anticipation of the potential lease of that space, we thought we'd present the concept to the board, and then also invite Mark to come and answer any questions that he may have, or that the board may have of him. What I can say is that right now, he's anticipating a sizable investment in the facility. The investment would be in some infrastructure, some bells and paging, fire alarm, access type of investments, also improvements that would be supportive of younger students, toilets, sinks, access, and so the types of improvements, by and large, are very consistent with what we're doing in our facilities and other facilities. I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point, or turn it over to Mark to introduce, or for him to introduce his plans and answer any of your questions.
Trustee Decker?
Has MCPS ever leased a property to an organization that's not a not-for-profit before?
You know, I'll answer the question by identifying who we've leased to. I'm thinking that most were nonprofits. So the YMCA leased for a short time. Walla Walla College, I'm guessing they're a private institution, so maybe not a non-for-profit, but possibly. The International School, those are the ones that come to mind. Yeah.
Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, are there community partners in this as well?
Yes, so I understand it from talking with Mark, there's quite a bit of interest among community partners in this endeavor. I think the concept is that there's a shortage of appropriate and available childcare services and preschool opportunities, and many businesses in town are very interested in enhancing and improving the availability of childcare. And so Mark's identified a number of potential donors and granting agencies that would support this endeavor on his behalf.
So would it be helpful to have Mark come up to the podium and just give us kind of the 30,000-foot overview of what...
Thank you for having me. I'm incredibly nervous right now, so please forgive me. Yeah, so our discussions started with Mark Thane in the beginning about the property and identifying a space. We've been working really hard with a few community partners to try to develop a larger center to support the needs of the community. Right now, especially infant care and twos child care in the city is lacking. There's not a lot to go around for kiddos. Our waiting list is extensive, as are those around the community as well. In the initial beginning, what we were looking to do was develop a space of our own. But then, as we learned the availability of possibly moving into Cold Springs and renovating that space to provide care for initially 185 children from 6 weeks to 6 years of age, and then providing support for after-school care for those children in the school system already. K-3 is where we're looking to enter into that market. But then also work closely with the school board and staff to figure out where we can provide the most support. Franklin, where my children go right now, is decently supported with campfire down the road and flagship services. So try to identify some of those schools to where we could go pick up and help relieve some of the after-school care as well.
Thanks. So I'm an early childhood person. I'm very, very aware of the child care crisis that we face in town. And I'm very excited to see all comers developing innovative new solutions. Because this is public property, there are some really specific concerns that the public may have about what kinds of entities might be using our public trust. This is really something that we hold in trust for our community.
Sure.
To meet that need. And I'm all about finding a way that those things come together. But I'm curious about some of the ways that your business plan
Sure.
includes meeting the need, not just for those with resources, for example, in town, and how your business plan might incorporate meeting the need of families who have low income or need unusual hour care, which is a huge need as well.
Yep.
Also specifically what your plans are for infant and toddler care and
Absolutely.
providing for high quality there. And finally, I do have a lot of questions, sorry, what your plans are around workforce. And we know, of course, that supporting the early childhood workforce is not any one organization's responsibility alone. However, because again, it's a public resource that's going to be going to, in some sense, support a private business. Don't get me wrong, I understand no child care is truly for a lot of profit. However, it's important that we understand that the workers in that facility are also going to be having a high-quality experience. So anyway, those are a lot of questions. Specifically, it was about sort of sliding scale and access.
Yep.
Workforce supports, and then meeting like the breadth of need.
Sure.
Thanks.
So as far as access is concerned, I'll address right now. So we are a for-profit company. The reason why we selected that model doesn't mean that we make money. For the last 2.5 years, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this and have not taken anything out of it, just so you know where I'm at. And I'd be happy to show everybody all of our finances on that as well. The reason why we selected that model was I've been a part of a lot of nonprofits, and they're great and they're fantastic. But there are times to where a single board can really set back something that a lot of people have worked really hard on. And I've seen that far too often in a lot of boards that I've worked in. We are really a teacher-owned business. My co-owners here with me now, Tess and Kate, they were fundamental in helping us start a child care facility. I would not have done this 2.5 years ago if I didn't meet these two lovely ladies, along with the third one who couldn't be here tonight, Dana. My children are in the care for them, and it just, life happened to where we met up, and they really wanted to open something. I had just sold something else and said, this sounds great, let's do this. Let's start a facility. So with that being said, access for children, our rates, if you look at our rates right now, they are comparable, if not a little bit lower than some of the higher end facilities here in Missoula. Still offering the breadth of, what childcare provides. High quality teachers, which we've been very blessed and fortunate enough to have very little turnover rate. We do pay them a little bit higher than everywhere else. It's still not a great wage. We're trying to work and to change that. That's why when Cold Springs fell into our lap, as you'll all see in the lease when it comes out, the square footage price is extraordinarily reasonable for what is actually around this city. And so with that, we're able to leverage that and pass that along. Childcare is not looking to make anyone, 6 figures. What we want to do is we want to pay high-quality teachers what they're worth and provide care for the children. So it's not something that we're looking at doing or subleasing space to, turn a huge profit. That's not what we're about. That's why we didn't get into it. So with that, we work very closely with Best Beginning Scholarships, which are scholarships set forth by DPHHS and the state of Montana to help lower income families. We've addressed that a little bit in the lease when you guys see it. Typically, the lease payments are due on the 5th. We've asked that they're due on the 15th because that's typically when, Best Beginning Scholarships kind of come down. So we're anticipating having a lot of lower income families take part in our services, because with the cost of the lease and with the amount of children that we have, we're able to spread out that cost to keep it where we're at now, if not maybe a little bit lower. We have to look at all the final numbers, so I'm not going to promise anything, but not to have the typical increases that you see in childcare on a yearly basis that are 5 to 8% of tuition. So workforce is difficult. Like I said, we've been very fortunate enough to have a lot of workers hang with us, stay with us for the last 2.5 years. It's the culture that we breed and build at our facility that, wants them to stay. Again, it's a lower paying job. There's a lot of opportunity for them to go, elsewhere, but it's the culture that we build around it, and having teacher-owned and teacher-led rooms instead of like a top-down management room, it really does allow our staff to build their own wealth of knowledge in hopes of one day going out and opening in their own childcare facility. Because the one thing that will never have in excess enough is childcare, quality childcare facilities. So trying to build that into them. You know, we want to start working a little bit closely with the University of Montana in their preschool programs, see if we can't have a partnership there to have some of the teachers come over as well. I mean, they focus primarily on preschool. Like I said, there's a lot of need for infant and toddler care, more so than preschool. So hopefully build some of those relationships and grow our workforce there. But, you know, we're looking at, with that space and the number of children that we have, somewhere around 55 employees, at which point we have the opportunity to offer healthcare and retirement plans and those objects that aren't available for other childcare facilities, which will allow us to hire a good workforce and retain. But then also, from an employee side, that's great. If you look at Missoula and the growth that we have in our tech industry, you know, we've been talking a lot with the chamber and working with the chamber, and what they're seeing in your submittables and your ATGs and your class passes is there is a large influx of workforce coming in that is of childbearing age. And so one of the big things with like a community workforce is there's nowhere for these children to go when they do come in. So it's one thing that stifles Missoula's growth is not having a place for them to take their children. Submittable is a great example. You know, we've worked with them a little bit. They're trying to open up their own corporate childcare facility, but that's just for kiddos 2 and under, and it's only 16 children. So it's not, I mean, it's fantastic, and I think it's great, and I wish more corporations would start to do this. But then you also look at green space in Missoula and the state requirements for spacing of children, group sizing in children, as well as green space. So having a facility such as Cold Springs with 6 acres of green space and the ability to retrofit each room to accommodate, you know, the myriad of children that we'll have is just a fantastic opportunity. Sorry, Grace, there was one more and I forgot it.
Thanks. So my question is, I'm excited to hear that these are all considerations that you have in mind. Considerations about supporting staff, because of course that leads to quality. Considerations about spread. You said that the square footage price is so reasonable that you want to pass that along. And you were talking about passing it along in terms of not raising rates, and maybe it would give some opportunity to pass it along in terms of the scaling of staff and supporting all around. Is there a way to build some of that into our agreement with the organization? Because while it's true that in nonprofits, one board can come in and change things, but a 20-year lease
Right.
is a really long time for any business. And although your turnover is great at your organization now, there's no way to know who will be really in the driver's seat of a private business down the road.
Sure.
So is there a way, and I'm not sure if I'm asking you or if I'm asking Pat in terms of our defining, to build in some of those considerations around access and workforce supports and quality, if there's going to be a lease that's a 20-year duration in a public facility?
I think there's probably some room to incorporate expectations, scope of services, really our expectations. And most often, as relates to a lease, it involves how you care for the facility and not necessarily, well, it also involves the types of services that are offered and the types of use. And so, I mean, I think that we could add expectations that will probably sound good, but have, you know, not a ton of teeth to them, but will at least express expectations that we have in terms of quality, in terms of types of services, and I mean, I think that's appropriate and doable. It's just, I would caution you against the, just how much teeth we'll be able to incorporate. And I've already started working with our attorneys and getting language put together, so.
Trustee Service?
I guess I was just wondering if it was successful, do you see yourself ever expanding more? Because you're only doing leasing part of the building.
Yes. So the interesting part is the reason why we only looked at leasing the west wing of the building is because it's already at grade, it's already at ground level. And so for us to make all of our changes that we need to the space for exterior exits, to make it ADA compliant, it was easier to start there. Looking at the facility, the older new addition, I don't know how to phrase it, but it's about 18 inches off grade, and then all the boiler pipes go around the exterior walls. So for us to have a more cost-effective transition in there, it was better for us to start on that side. But I mean, I could see us, if it is successful, moving into the other portion of the building. It's just making sure that it is regulated and licensed under the state. So.
Much more mundane question. Is there enough parking over there for 55 employees?
So that's interesting. No, there's not. And, we've kind of talked a little bit. There is a portion of space along the south side that is grass right now that kind of backs the parking lot as you come in off of Cardinal, that we would look at expanding into parking. For that, especially if the other half of the building gets leased, then, there's definitely not. Us leasing out, only the west wing, there is enough under city ordinance, I believe, for the parking spaces are required for that. But yeah, if the other side was leased out, we would have to develop new parking in that grassy area.
Any other questions? Trustee McDonald?
Okay, a 20-year lease is a long time.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess my question is, probably more so for Pat, is what happens if we do a 20-year lease and Missoula, I don't think, is going to stop growing, and we come to a point where we would have to use that for schooling for the kids, and we got that tied up in a 20-year lease. I'm just curious of what problems that might represent.
So we've had those conversations, and I think that's still part of the language that we're wrestling with the lease. And Mark and I have talked too about the term and our comfort with a shorter term lease. The issue that Mark will run up against is the investment of dollars and the need for a longer term for banking purposes. And but I think that where donors and grants and those types of things go might bear upon the term a little bit. We've talked about provisions that are sort of exit clauses for us. The challenge with those is that when you have that level of capital investment, then you're paying a buyout essentially, and fair market value less depreciation or some such calculation. I think we would really need to look seriously at our demographic information and think real hard about whether we would climb into that space, and whether there are other alternatives given this type of lease and this type of investment. But it has crossed our mind.
Thanks. You knew I was going to have a lot of questions, and I super want to find the right way to move. If this moves forward, it will obviously be of huge benefit to lots and lots of kids and families, and So, just trying to flesh out all the questions so people have heard that they're on the table. I do want to go back to one question I had about that accessibility question and whether you had considered off hours like late into the evening or on weekends as high demand, low availability times, especially for our lower income families, not the submittable employees necessarily, but McDonald's and Ollie's and so on.
Yeah, and MET, yeah.
Right. And then the other quick question is whether built into your business plan a contingency for when publicly funded pre-K passes at the state legislature. I said.
Yeah, no, I am actually, because there's the concerns of when you want to move back into the space for, to occupy it for, school-age children. And I was joking around with Pat saying, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned because the day is going to happen when the state of Montana will finally catch up with the rest of the country and fund pre-K. It's needed. It's something that we look at, and that's great. Like, we're not opposed to that. We're not afraid of it. That's what I actually see Cold Springs being used for in the future. Will be publicly funded pre-K programs, which is great because let me fund and build the school for you and then you can take it back. No, no, I see there, anyway, to get back on that, yes, we are aware that that is going to happen. As far as the after hours and weekend care, that was something that we built into our original plan a year ago when we started to talk about, a new space and developing a new space. Unfortunately with a couple other partners that didn't work. But it is something we want to do. It's something we haven't written into our plan yet, because I'm unsure what that would look like. It's not something that we're not afraid of doing. It's something that we definitely want to provide. Security and access also, part of that property is left available for public use, and we also want the playgrounds that we build, the playground that is currently there is rated for 5 and above. Clearly our usage, we're going to have to build 2 new playgrounds for kids under 2 and then 3 to 5. But we also want to make those publicly available too, since there isn't a high demand of parks in that area. As you start to go up Lower Miller Creek, Nicole Park's already ripped up, and I don't know what the future of that is, so we want to make that space publicly available. That's licensing questions, so we're rated, and I know that licensing will work with us, we've talked to them before, but we're rated as a center, so our group sizes are mandated by the state, teacher ratios are mandated by the state, a myriad of things. When you start to look at after-hours care and to make that affordable, you need a different type of license, as Grace knows. And, that's more of a group license where you can blend and mix children. What that would look like in that space with those rooms is just something we haven't really looked at yet. We really just wanted to take right now what we know we could do very well and then implement those things as we go along, instead of biting off more than we could chew.
Any other questions, Trustee Smith?
This is probably one for Pat as well. Pat, I just want to do a little bit of the financial. I know that this is an excellent, as Mark said, it's a good, fair price for him. I know there's inherent costs in having a facility, and I wasn't sure if you had said utilities were included in that or not, but basically I want to make sure, are we going to pull a profit from this? And as he's only, or as this group is only going to use half the facility, would the other half still be available for either renting or other use if something came up that worked with them?
So like our other leases, we had contemplated a full triple net lease, so the costs of running the leased space would be borne by the tenant. Then beyond that, the other concern that we've expressed in other leases and we've talked about with Mark is the extent to which we would invest in improvements during the term of the lease. So in effect, it's a handoff as is piece of property and then improve it as requested and approved by the board. But we wouldn't look to to be a huge investor in the capital improvements of the project. With the other leases, we've had a cap of 50,000 that we'd invest in sort of the structural components if that was, if there was an issue that came up like that. And yes, it would be, it would generate revenue. I mean, so the cost would be borne by the tenant, and then even though the square footage rental is small, or not huge, it is a school building, and so we have talked to an appraiser who we've worked with, and when we were looking at the other property, he put it at this amount. So we're not thinking that we're giving it away either, but just considering the type of property that's being leased, and it would generate some revenue.
And just, that's going to go right back into that fund that we talked about last meeting that we're using for the purchase over here.
That's correct. So Fund 15 is where we deposit the rental proceeds, and that's where we deposit.
Any other?
One more, I'm so sorry.
Okay, sure.
Thank you for indulging me. This one is kind of more, well, I'm not sure which for who, but you had mentioned the idea of other philanthropic or grant sources providing support for doing the renovations and so on. And is it contemplated then that as a nonprofit entity, MCPS would actually be the receiver of those resources, and then those would be to then renovate for the use of the for-profit entity of the business? And how does that look?
Mark and I had a conversation today, and I think it's fair to say that well, certainly we don't know to what extent donors or grantors would be involved. It was brought up, the potential that we would be the recipient, and I communicated to Mark today that I thought that would be maybe muddying the waters a little bit for us. And certainly if we're a donee of a contribution for facilities, it wouldn't go to Cold Springs because we have other places that we would place it. And we don't have students there. It would in this case be used in a tenancy, lease, lessor, lessee relationship. So a variety of concerns. And so if, also involving us becoming the party that would do the construction and following all the rules and requirements that we have as a public entity for construction, probably doesn't work well for Mark, because we do bidding, we have all sorts of, as you guys know, the public process that goes along. I had a conversation with Megan, and she agreed with that approach, just a cleaner third-party lease, lessor, lessee transaction make more sense.
Okay, I just lost my train of thought there. Okay, so any of the reconstruction or remodeling or anything that may be done, geez, I just lost my train of thought again. Is that going to be open for them just to do it, or is it going to be something that is going to go through the board for any remodeling or anything that they might be doing?
Yeah, good question. So the lease will provide that any improvements would be approved by the lessor, which would be the board, essentially.
Any other questions or comments or discussion? Seeing none, then thank you for hearing our many questions. I think that really will help, and it helps a lot to hear it now, so that when we revisited it in September, that people will have a chance to perhaps get some public comment from folks and be able to answer questions, ask questions. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you. Trustees, thank you so much.
Thanks. And it's information only, but I didn't know if anyone has public comment. Seeing no one going to the podium, then thank you all for coming and attending the meeting. Now we move on to B2, and which is a discussion at this point about the proposed 2019-2020 budgets. At next Tuesday's meeting, we'll be dealing with them as separate budgets because they come out of separate accounts. But Pat, do you want to give us the overview of what we'll be discussing next week?
You bet. So we're getting closer, although the documents you're seeing are really similar to what you've seen up to this point. Page 26 is the most recent projections for elementary and high school, and just wanted to point out the changes that are here as compared to last time you saw that. Under the salary and benefit obligations to build into the budget, under additional classroom staff, we added some preschool staff. That's a new add. That's 0.6 certified special ed instructor, 0.5 occupational therapist, and then 2 paras, each at 21 hours, make up that add to the elementary budget. We are already in a negative situation on the elementary side budgetarily, but some of Ginny Haynes and Karen and her folks had completed the work on the excess special ed cost calculation, and there's more than this much room to increase that permissive levy in the tuition fund to support excess special ed costs. So that is added as a support and expenditure offset that would help the general fund, as well as the work comp credit. So that would be a one-time only use on the work comp credit, both on the elementary and the high school. The high school work comp, just on the elementary side, the work comp credit. On the high school, there's a 50,000 listed as an increase in permissive levy to support the excess special ed costs. We could levy more like the elementary, and in this case, we could actually levy less and still balance, because you'll see we're to the good about 17,000. And even though we're to the good, I know that we have needs in student activity, transportation, teaching and learning materials, some of the other items that are listed above with no numbers next to them. So this is really a summary of the increases and decreases to the budget as compared to the current status of the budget. Page 27, lots of information. That this is general fund only, and it details the revenue sources and the changes in those sources of funds under the school funding formula. Really, if you look under these boxes, the elementary is the top box, and below you'll see the change in mills levied. You'll see that we're anticipating a reduction in mills from 109.9 to 101.68. That's 8.23 mills. You'll see the A and B increase, K6 and 7-8. We break those out because the 7-8 student per A and B is more. So those are big factors. Big factor, taxable valuation, 116.4 million up to 129.4 million. It's a 11.25% jump. Really has no effect on how much revenue we bring in. What it affects is the mill value and the number of mills, and that then has an impact upon taxes. So our $200,000 home tax impact will be less, and you'll see that on the next page. The high school, similar sort of information. There's about 11% bump in the taxable valuation. We also saw the A and B increase this past year, which was great for the budgets, and also the number of mills levied will go down. I sort of, just for kicks and giggles, ran the it's the kind of guy I am. If we levied the same mills this year as we did last year at the new mill value, what that would mean, and what it would mean is that locally we would generate $1,065,000 rather than 300. We'd generate that much more. Instead of 13.1 million, we generate 14.2 million. It's about $1 million more dollars. Just kind of interesting when you compare it to what how the funding structure works. So it's not like we sit at 110 mills and whatever happens to the value of those mills, we either gain or lose. We levy to a specific number as a school district. So that's sort of the interplay with these numbers. Pages 28 and 29, most of this information is last year. I just wanted to familiarize you guys with what you'll see next week. The only information I have that shows the levy increases, mills, and tax impact is for the general fund, which is down at the bottom of each of these pages. But next week you'll have it for all of the funds. We don't have it for the other funds because we're determining how much to reallocate. The general fund you don't do that with, but the other funds that you do. And it's a arduous process this time of year, and so Dan Parrish is really the main point person working on that piece. If you look just on page 28, the general fund with the increase in taxable value, this is what I'm talking about, your $200,000 home impact is a negative $22, and that really is linked to the change in taxable value. 29 is the high school version of page 28. Very similar impact on the general fund, same reasoning, and then you have the last year's information in terms of the increase in levies and the impact, tax impact. Big deal last year in the high school was one of those building reserves dropped off, so that was a big deal last year. The remainder of the attachments are from last year. There's no real reason to go through them. It's just more or less showing you what things will look like next week. You'll have the adoption motion page that shows final budgets and levy amounts that would be approved by the board, or we're asking the board to approve, along with the resolutions that approve the budgets and the property taxes to be raised to support those budgets. And those continue through page 36. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I have a series of questions on page 26. Starting with, at the top, we've got a 0.91% inflationary increase, which I presume came from legislature, and then we're seeing 2% across the board increase in pay. So my first question is, does this really mean that more and more of our budget is going to salary and benefits as those two numbers differ? And then other question I have, you're showing certified and classified retirees savings at 260, which seems kind of round, so I'm thinking that's still an estimate. But you also have anticipated position savings, isn't that the same thing?
So the 0.91 inflationary increase is the legislative inflationary piece for this FY20. And that inflationary amount applies to the bulk of those revenue components that you see on page 27. And the primary piece of revenue funding is direct state aid, which is mostly a factor of our per A and B entitlement. And that's also linked to that's our student population, A and B. So the increases are both a factor of inflation and the change in our student population. So there is a difference between what was negotiated as pay increases versus the inflationary increase from the state. And part of it is because our budgets grew by more than just the inflationary increase. They also grew by the fact that we had more students. Then the 260, this will likely remain as an estimate through next week, and you're totally right, 260 is an estimate. So we won't really have the full picture of retirees and how much they saved until after you adopt budgets, basically. So there's a number of estimates that are built into this budget. One of them is that. What we estimate here is about 10 certified retirees at about 22,000, and then smaller savings associated with classified retirees. That's where we came up with that estimate. Additional estimate here is the certified lane movement. So certified staff have until September to submit their credits to move on the salary schedule. And so that's really built upon past practice, and it's very much an estimate. The other increases that are here are really estimates too, because you take a snapshot of the staff in place, and then you apply the percentage increase and what the step would be. You can have people that resign during the year, that retire during the year even, and that really is what leads to that position savings. So we get to the end of the year, and if we're seeing where we're encumbering more than what the actual cost is by a significant amount, we try and build that back in by recognizing that, okay, we're overstating our salary costs, and so let's recognize that and help, apply it for the following year's budget. Did I answer all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee Lorenzen?
Well then. So I know on page 27, we don't have last year's data, so we can't be very exact about this. But in general, if we are getting a 54 student increase in 7-8, but only a 28 increase in 9-12, kind of tells me that our feeder schools are dropping off in the numbers of kids. Do you see what I mean? That if we're putting that many extra out of our 7-8, their 7-8s must be getting smaller? Does that sound right?
That's, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I know that we've had bubbles go through that are represented by either the 7th grade class or the 8th grade class. One is, it's 8th grade. Yeah, so I don't know that it's broken down to the feeder schools, but for sure there's bubbles, and it's starting to make their way through the high school A and B, because we're starting to see some growth there. When we have the budget adoption next week, we'll update those graphs that'll show kind of the historical A and B change, and show the mill change over time once we get the final numbers for all of the funds. But for the general fund, I'm not sure. We could try and look, and we can try and see what the comparison is between feeder schools and our students. Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? Hatton, did you have something?
If it's appropriate to add one other insight I could offer with regard to Trustee Lorenzen's question, our demographic reports that we've done for the district going back to 2013 when we were preparing for the bond, and then last year related to our boundary study, show that bump in students that you see right now concentrated in the middle school should make it to the high school by about 2022, 2023, as we watch the bump move through, which I think is what Pat was also referring to. So those reports have tended to be relatively true. They don't necessarily, as Pat said, triangulate to whether or not that bump is coming more from city students versus county K-8s, but we would expect to see it in about 3 more years, 2 to 3 more academic years.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none? Well, thank you for that, and we'll look forward to the conversation next week with more numbers that will change. And thank you, especially to you and Dan, for all the work that it takes to get this budget done because of the fluidity of the numbers you're dealing with. So thank you very much. So then we move on to 8B3, and even though in the topic it says approve renewal of Montana quality education, we take out the word approve. This is a decision made by the administration to join this organization, and so this is more information only so that everyone knows what this organization is about and why we do belong to it. And some of us who've been on the board a while understand it, but if you Pat, if you or Rob want to explain what it's about, then it's kind of what value it brings to
I'll
us.
take a stab at it. Pat's done a lot of speaking this evening, so I'm going to give him a break. So MQEC is a longtime organization in the state of Montana that was established many, many years ago out of the lawsuit for around school funding. So I know Missoula was one of the first districts that jumped on board and put some money in towards supporting legal costs related to that lawsuit. So MQEC was born out of that, and it continues to be an active group that helps, promote public school, promote public school funding at both, the local level, but also the state level during the legislative session. So this is an annual fee that we pay to belong to that organization. And Pat, would you add anything to that?
I guess the only thing I'd add is I know that going forward, they're going to be monitoring the Supreme Court action at the, regarding private schools and private funding.
And does everyone understand that reference? There's been a petition for cert filed at the U.S. Supreme Court level from the Montana State Supreme Court case, which determined that a certain tax credit could not go to for-profit schools. And so that's one of the areas where they're hoping to be able to have a voice in that litigation. So, anything else to add? Any public comment? Seeing none, then the next topic, number 4, is something that the trustees would approve because it is our board's membership in MTSBA. And so the membership cost for 2019-2020 is $18,308. Pat, if you want to explain some of the benefits, or Rob, or I can too, because I think we've all taken advantage of several of the opportunities that are afforded through belonging to this statewide organization.
I think the biggest deal from my perspective is the ability to participate in their insurance programs, the workers' compensation, which is MSGIA, and the unemployment insurance programs. They're all school-driven and for schools, and only schools belong to them. And they are good programs, and they've been good programs. In addition, there's a number of free training and consultation services that I've taken advantage of and I know others have. The other thing I guess I'd say is what they do is they operate on a sliding scale that's based upon the size of the school, and the increase this year I think is just over $300, so it's tied to an inflationary increase that's either CPI adjusted or based upon the legislative increase. So I guess that.
Anyone have any questions? Or I don't know if Ann or our trustee Wake wants to weigh in on it since she's on their board in terms of, the kind of work they do. I know I take advantage of legal consulting. I take advantage of questions concerning structure, procedure. They're always able to take phone calls and provide solid information. Yeah. So.
One I would add that I should have mentioned is just the advocacy during the legislative session. It's really remarkable, the changes that have happened really in the last, 10 years due to their advocacy.
Any other questions? So the recommendation is that we approve the renewal of the MTSBA membership for 2019-2020. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Smith and seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Other than to, again, reiterate that they do provide really valuable services to our district. Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the renewal of the MTSBA membership for the 2019-2020 fiscal years, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. We come to number 5, which, as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, since there's just a small, I think it's a clause or two that needs some revision, our language revision, we won't be voting on it again because we want to make sure that the public has the exact language before we take it as an action item. But Pat, since it's on the agenda, do you want to just give us an overview of what we'll be seeing once that final language is completed?
So what's reflected in the background is really the financial picture, which is a new 5-year contract, 2.5% increase for the first 3 years that then would involve a negotiation for the remainder of that contract. The other piece, which is new this year, is the seat belts. There's two components. One is the new buses equipped with seat belts. And the new buses are, the additional cost for buses equipped with seat belts is $8,400. And I have listed as 8 buses, but there's actually 7 new buses. So that total cost is $58,800, and we'll cover that cost this year through a route cost that's part of the contract and part of the Schedule 1 to the contract. The other cost is a bigger cost, which is the retrofitting of 30 buses, and there's 30 buses that are capable of being retrofitted because they're of a certain age, 2010 or 2012 and newer. That cost is $11,500 or thereabouts for retrofitted buses, and so Beach is agreeable to us covering that cost in 3 installments rather than one upfront, so we appreciate that concession. And they're a long ways with their contractor getting those buses retrofitted with seatbelts. And I think that the only other thing I'd point out, and I know Rob has heard this too, but when we get to the point of a new 5-year contract, this will put Beach at 80 years of service to MCPS, which is pretty impressive. It's a family business, and they really do provide excellent service.
Did you have a question? Trustee Smith? Okay.
2 quick questions, Pat. Number one, I hear you talking about the cost for retrofitting and for getting the new seatbelts on the buses. It sounds like we are bearing 100% of that cost, but we're not the only ones that use those buses. I'm wondering if there isn't a component in there that they would bear some of it or pass it on to. I was on one of the buses just the other day for a trip, and it didn't have seatbelts on it yet, but I think we would have used them if they were there.
Yeah, we raised that point and been assured that all of the seatbelts being used and retrofitted are used for MCPS. So they're all used by us. They're all to and from yellow school buses.
Yeah, but I mean, but when school buses, that very school bus that may drive my kid to school on a Friday could be used on a Saturday for something else, right? I mean,
not to my knowledge, not with those seat-belted buses. They have a number of other buses that are used for their other customers, and these are dedicated buses for.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that our buses are dedicated to us.
I didn't either, because we had the same contemplation and conversation.
And the second question I had was real quick, the 2.5% increase for the first year. This is a 5-year contract. Are we just coming off a 5-year contract, or are we just coming off year 3 of a 5-year contract?
So we're coming off of year 2 of a 5-year contract. So the previous contract provided for a 4.5% increase. So we are negotiating for, and that's part of the negotiations here, is a new 5-year contract with 3 years committed on the price.
So the next opportunity to negotiate would be after year 3 for this one?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everybody's super excited about seatbelts coming into the buses. I think it's a great example of being able to find the funding, the wizards in your office, Pat, for the things that we prioritize as a district. And I'm curious about how our 5-year contract might need to also have funding found for starting school later as we continue to explore that conversation, because that conversation was really shelved because of the cost of busing. And so I'm wondering if we're locked in any way to this contract in a way that might make that a more challenging conversation, or if there's room to pursue that, because we are able, if we can find funding for the things we prioritize, our community spoke loud and clear that that's something they want us to not drop.
Yeah, I don't see this contract as precluding that conversation at all. And the funding to support both the increase and the seatbelt enhancement, because it's enhancement to the buses we use for to and from transportation, will be the transportation fund. And so it will be through our permissive levy, and so our local taxpayer support will help cover that cost, which would be the support we'd look at for that early start time. Exactly.
I guess could you just kind of give us an idea, if we did not have Beach as our dedicated contractor, what would it look like? What other options would we have?
Yeah, it's a really good question, a scary question for us, because we've seen other communities that have had family operators, and when that family has ceased doing operating their busing business or run into different financial hardships. Usually it's a larger company that has come in and stepped in, and it's not always been great, just from conversations with other districts, both in terms of cost and in terms of service. The Beach does an amazing job finding bus drivers, and I think part of it is just their approach with their employees, and so they have a dedicated, loyal bunch of folks, and I don't know that that's the case with the larger sort of outfits that operate busing companies for schools. And we, what our goal is that Beach isn't the highest and they're not the cheapest, and so that's where we try and shoot. It's not always easy to compare prices, because there's some that are very high around the state and some that are not, but we try and get in the middle is where we try and be, and that's an agreeable goal for them as well.
Any other questions or comments? That was a good question. Seeing no questions, then as I indicated, it'll be coming back to us once the language is finalized. And so this was a good preview of what we'll be talking about. And thank you for all the really good questions. So then we move on to C1, which is to approve the personnel report. It's found on page 36. It's the routine personnel report. Anything of note, Dave?
No. One of the cords fell out. I wasn't sure if I just disconnected myself, but apparently not. Probably just down the line.
Okay. Any general questions for Dave? See none, then is there a motion to approve the personnel report that's attached to the agenda? Moved by trustee Newbold and seconded by trustee Wake. We have board discussion of a general nature. We don't discuss specific individuals. Any board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? The same caveat applies to that as well. Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the items on the provided personnel report, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is all trustees present. Then we come to C2, which is a request for exception to board policy 3110 for entrance placement and transfer. And Julie, it looks like there is a student who will be turning 19 during the school year.
Dave did disconnect me. This is a student who turns 19 in September, but intends to complete her graduation requirements in the first trimester, and so she just barely missed the cutoff.
And so this is something that the board sees not on a regular basis, but we certainly want to make sure that people stay in school and get their education and certainly graduate from high school, even if the state of Montana hasn't figured out yet how to fund these students. So any questions for Julie? Seeing none, then is there motion to grant a waiver of age limitation for student MW, moved by trustee Duggar. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Wake. Any board discussion? See none. Any public comment? Seeing none. All trustees in favor of granting the waiver of the age limitation for the student identified by initials, please indicate by raising your hand. That's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move to 3, which is a request permission to adjust the elementary school calendar. Then we'll be doing the same for the high school calendar. And so we can talk about them perhaps as a unit, but we'd have to vote on them separately since that's how we do it during the course of adoption of calendars. But this is precipitated by some exciting news that Missoula's going to be really busy this spring.
Yes, so as a quick reminder, we had approved previously all of the school calendars for the next year. What happened, and that's done by a committee that's comprised of both administrators and teachers, and we get input also from our classified staff as well. So that's how we come up with our calendars, and we look across the state to see what events are coming up. One of the things we always check on is whether or not we're going to be hosting the state track meet, which occurs in late May, because it has a substantial impact on our district. And so in years past, when we've been the host of that meet, we've not had that school on that Friday, which precedes Memorial Day, because that's the date of the meet. This year, we were not awarded that. Subsequent to that, however, and subsequent to the approval by the board of the calendars, Helena dropped out, and all of a sudden now we are hosting the AA and C tournaments next May. So what we're proposing to do is to modify the calendar, which in all of those calendars that are before you would have that Friday, the May 22nd off, and then we would adjust the end of the school year by 1 day. I point out one quick thing, that if you look at all the different calendars, you might note that, like, for example, the elementary and middle school calendar would go from the 10th, which is a Wednesday, to a Thursday release. You would note that the early kindergarten calendar and the Jefferson preschool calendar, while it does take the 22nd off, it does not end or modify the end date. The reason for that, it doesn't, when we do the calendar, we have to abide by the state requirements, accreditation requirements, which for most of the schools are 1,080 hours. For the younger grades, it's 720 hours, so it wouldn't require us to make any modification of the end date for those. And then the Big Sky, Sentinel, Hellgate, and Willard schedules, again, we would go from the 22nd, take the 22nd off and go to the 11th. You'll note that Sealy's not on there because Sealy already has an alternative schedule, so that's why we're not adjusting the Sealy calendar. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, just add one other thing to Dave's comments. In addition to state track, we're also hosting state softball the exact same weekend, sort of in the same location out there, so really busy, and it takes a lot of volunteers, most of which is our staff, to run those and host those tournaments.
That might have answered my question, but I was just wondering if you could talk about what the impacts are. I'm just wondering in terms of the elementary and kind of the impact that it has on working parents to take a day off of school.
It's a great question. In the past, I talked with the ADs at the high schools, and the impact is huge. We figured there's about 8,000 people that attend, and as Superintendent Watson just noted, we do have a lot of staff that goes out and participates and works with that. If we looked at it, do you just take care of the high schools since they're the direct impact? But the impact is much larger than that, because it's going into a 3-day weekend. What we found in the past was that people extended into a 4-day weekend. So it does end up impacting our elementary, it impacts our bus schedules, it impacts all of those. And so what we wanted to have is that consistency across the board. So you have the elementary and high schools having both the same day off and the same end date, because it does impact families, as you said, but you have families that have kids across the grades from middle school, elementary, and high school. And we do have a significant amount of staff need and support in order to run these events and host these events in Missoula as well.
Would you expect that some of our feeder schools would follow suit and adjust their calendars? Is that something that happens often? Many of them follow, of course, MCPS's calendars as we set them up.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I could find out. I don't generally track our feeder schools, but you're correct. A lot of them do try to mirror what we do.
I wonder if we would want to make an effort to communicate out at least that the change had been made. I'm sure that's part of what you do.
And I'd be happy to do that.
Great. Any other questions?
I saw
Oh, sure.
I was just going to say, target range, we haven't made any change. We haven't that's not on our radar, so I don't, I'll pass it on to our school at least.
Yeah, I was thinking Target Range might be the school that would be impacted the most, just because congestion in that area is going to be pretty crazy during that weekend. But you're on it, so we're good. Any other questions? So, the recommendation, oh, I'm sorry, a question? Sorry, I didn't see.
Can we volunteer to help?
Yeah, I was thinking that was just a great question. Absolutely. I know it's something that, I've done in the past, and it's a lot of fun to go out and see the families and the kids. So I would absolutely encourage people to go out and participate, and they can never have enough volunteers.
Put my name on the list.
Okay.
Softball or track?
Yeah, now we're good, so don't plug that person back in. Sorry, you're disconnected, Hatton, we apologize. Okay. So, now we'll deal with the calendar separately, because one impacts elementary classrooms and the other impacts high schools. So the recommendation is to make the modification to the previously approved schedule so that Friday, May 22nd will be a not in-class day, and the last day of school would then move to June 11th. So everyone understands that? So is there a motion to approve the modified 2019-2020 elementary and middle school, early kindergarten, and Jefferson preschool program calendars? Moved by trustee Lorenzen and seconded by trustee McDonald. Is there any discussion? See none. Any public comment? See none, then all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to K-12 trustees. Then we move on to the parallel request from the administration to approve the modified 2019-2020 Big Sky, Hellgate, Sentinel, and Willard alternative high school calendars, noting that Sealy, so on, won't be impacted by it. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. All trustees in favor of approving the modified 2019-2020 calendars for Big Sky, Hellgate, Sentinel, and Willard, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. We come to number 5, which is to approve the wage and salary increases for defined employees. Is this the last of the last of the last of the groups?
Actually, the crossing guard noon duties and bus aides are not part of any individual group. We just do have an hourly wage. We don't do any negotiation with them. But to answer your question, yes, this would be the last group that we'd be looking at this point, or groups rather, to give a raise to this year.
And so I'm assuming, how is the raise increase determined? The 63 cents?
I would say that's a bit arbitrary. As you know, with the other groups, with classified was less than that, but anything that we did would be less than $10 an hour, and it's just was not palatable to us. These are notoriously difficult positions for us to fill. To be honest, I'm not sure that even having it to a $10 will change that. It's partly the nature of the job, which is hour to hour and a half shift in the morning for the crossing guards, 2 hours to 2.5 hours for noon duties. So we tend to try to recruit within the schools, find the parent who wants to be the fly on the wall kind of thing, and just encourage them to apply. In fact, we've actually modified our application process to make it much simpler to try to get people into these positions. But we didn't want to put before out there something less than $10 an hour at this point.
And so these are employees that might be employed at all, so it's a Hellgate or elementary and high school matter, or they would be.
Yes, most of the noon duties are all elementary, and I noted that Pat had put that into the budget in the elementary end.
Okay. So the recommendation,
I'm sorry, it's I think it's just elementary.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's just elementary.
yeah, that was my question. So let's take out the secondary, so it means it's K-12 trustees. And so recommendation is that the trustees approve the 63-cent per hour wage and salary increase for the employees groups defined above, and it's retroactively applicable back to July 1st?
Yes, though we haven't had anybody working in those positions
right.
yet, so.
So that's okay. Okay. So is there a motion to approve the 63 cents per hour wage and salary increase? Moved by trustee Decker. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none. Is there any public comment? We can take comment, and then if you have a question, I'd suggest talk to Rob later. So, thanks. So, any other public comment? Seeing none, then all K-12 trustees in favor of approving the 63-cent per hour wage and salary increase, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all K-12 trustees. Then we come to a board action, which is to appoint a representative for interdisciplinary child information and school safety team. So this is actually something that's been in place for a while. And under an earlier version of the statute, the superintendent automatically became that person and became part of the interdisciplinary child information and school safety team. But after a legislative change, it requires that the trustees appoint the representative for our board. And so I've made a recommendation to you that we appoint Rob to that position so he can start interacting with that group. And that would be, pardon? Okay. So we need a motion first, because I've just asked you to do it, so someone want to move? Okay, and then trustee Newbold second? Okay. So, any questions for me? Bea walked me through, the process, and it really is just a statutory change to how someone from our district becomes involved in this process. And so I did receive a letter from the three, actually, Colaroli couldn't sign it because she'd already changed jobs, but the two county commissioners asked us as a district and as a board to get someone into that position as soon as we could. So that's why it's before us. Anything else to add, Rob? I know you've been in that position in Bozeman in the past, so.
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is a unique state law that really allows us to work together to help kids. So I'm excited to see that there'll be a team established here in Missoula.
So is there a motion to appoint Superintendent Rob Watson as the MCPS representative for the interdisciplinary child information and school safety team?
I think we got one.
Oh, we got, okay, sorry, I've lost my mind. Okay, yeah, we're on board comment. Any more board comment? Public comment? Okay, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve, or to appoint Superintendent Watson as the MCPS representative, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we once again come to public comment on non-agenda items. If anyone couldn't get here at the beginning of the meeting, wants to make a comment on something that they'd like to bring to our attention, we welcome comments now as well. And seeing that no one's racing to the podium, we're adjourned, and thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.